I never imagined that after 50 years of nurturing love within these walls, I would be cast aside like yesterday's news. As I sit here on this worn-out chair, the echoes of laughter and warmth seem to mock my solitude. I raised her like my own, cherished every milestone, every scraped knee, and yet, when the day came for her to spread her wings, she flew away without a backward glance, taking my heart with her. The ache of abandonment seeps through my bones, a reminder that love can twist into something unrecognizable. I often think of the sacrifices I made, the sleepless nights spent worrying for her future, and the countless hours I invested in shaping her into the person she is today. Yet here I am, alone, left to sift through memories that both comfort and torment me. But maybe, just maybe, there's more to this story than meets the eye. Before I go on, subscribe to the channel. Here, we tell stories no one else does. Stories of grandmas and grandpas the world tried to silence. The morning sun poured through the lace curtains of my modest kitchen, casting intricate patterns of light and shadow on the worn linoleum floor. I often found solace in the routine of my mornings, the gentle sounds of the world waking up outside my window. The chirping of the sparrows, the occasional distant laughter of children, and the muffled sounds of cars stirring to life. All of it felt familiar, like an old friend you haven't seen in a while. I would stand by the counter, cupping my hands around a steaming mug of coffee, breathing in the rich aroma, letting the warmth seep into my bones, a simple ritual that began each day anew. But today, everything felt different. The air was thick with an unsettling tension, as if the very walls of the house held their breath. I couldn't shake the sense of impending change, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. The coffee, once a source of comfort, tasted bitter as I sipped it, my thoughts swirling around me like the steam rising from the cup. I glanced around the kitchen, the floral tablecloth I had sewn years ago, the mismatched chairs that were as much a part of our family as the people who had sat in them. Memories hung heavily in the air with every glance. Laughter, arguments, and the gentle murmur of everyday life echoed in my heart. It was in this kitchen that I had raised my son, James, teaching him how to chop vegetables, sharing stories of my own childhood, and nurturing him through his teenage ups and downs. His laughter still lingered in the corners of the room, mixed with the sweet smell of cinnamon rolls baking in the oven. I poured my heart into every meal, each recipe, a love letter to my family, especially during those long years when I had welcomed Marissa into our lives as if she were my own child. I remember the day they met at college, the spark I saw in their eyes, and the determination I felt to embrace not just him, but her as well. I could never have imagined that the seed of betrayal would take root in the very home I built for love. Marissa was struggling back then, pulled between her dreams and the reality of her upbringing. I opened my heart and my home to her without hesitation, believing that nurturing her would help mend the pieces of her life that had been carelessly scattered. We bonded over late-night talks and shared secrets, laughter echoing through these very walls. I showed her how to make my famous chicken soup, and she taught me how to navigate this new age of technology. We became more than family. We became partners in crime, navigating the challenges of life. All the while, I thought we were building a future together. Yet here I stood, a jarring paradox of emotions threatening to unravel the countless warm moments we shared. Today, the kitchen felt colder, filled with an echoing silence that made the intimacy we once shared feel like a distant memory. I could almost hear the ticking of the clock, each second amplifying my growing apprehension. It was as if I were tuning into a radio frequency that had suddenly gone static, the connection I once felt with Marissa slipping away. I thought of the words I last spoke to her, words of encouragement and love, and they now tasted sharp on my tongue. This house, once a sanctuary of laughter and warmth, felt like the walls were closing in, a painful reminder that sometimes love alone is not enough to keep a family whole. I often look back at the woman I was before, even the first hint of betrayal lingered in the air. I was young once, full of dreams and hopes, an ambitious soul who poured love into family. My life was marked by days spent nurturing my children, particularly my son, who became the anchor of my existence. I devoted myself to guiding him through childhood, ensuring he had the skills and values to navigate the world. I hoped to raise an honest and compassionate man, and perhaps I succeeded, but I never foresaw how much turmoil could arise from love itself. My journey took a different turn when I welcomed Ellie into our lives, my son's wife. From the moment I laid eyes on her, I felt a surge of affection. She was bright-eyed and eager to please, almost as if she had stepped into my life as the daughter I had always dreamed of having. I remember sewing her wedding gown, tears streaming down my face, thinking that I was finally getting the daughter I had longed for, one who would bring joy into our family. It was a time of laughter, shared meals, and joyous holidays where traditions intertwined and grew. I poured every ounce of wisdom into her, just as I had done with my son, weaving the threads of our lives together. With time, my contributions evolved into a bond that felt invincible, but those threads began to fray in ways I couldn't see coming. I watched Ellie transform from a bright-eyed newlywed to a woman deeply entrenched in her own worries and aspirations. Somewhere along the way, my nurturing became suffocating. I hardly noticed the subtle shift in her demeanor, how her smiles became more often reserved for my grandkids and less for me. I dismissed the changes, convincing myself that every marriage goes through challenges, just as every family does. I failed to recognize the growing distance until it was too late. Amidst the ordinary chaos of life, I suddenly became aware of a change in tone, a slight chill when I entered a room. A harsh word here, a dismissive gesture there. I remember the Thanksgiving dinner when I asked if anyone needed help in the kitchen, and her response cut like a knife. "We've got it under control, Mom." I felt the word, Mom, slip away. It was a title I had cherished that suddenly seemed weighed down by resentment. I could feel my heart clench, the sense of betrayal blossoming with every passing moment. Little did I know how deep the divide would go. Now, as I sit in this small, quiet room, a stranger in the home I once believed to be my second sanctuary, I find myself grappling with who I am. I feel like a ghost haunting my own life, clinging to memories that have soured like spoiled milk. The woman I was, the caregiver, the fierce protector, is slipping through my fingers like sand. Each day, the echo of laughter has been replaced by silence, and where there was once warmth, there is now this chill of abandonment. Who am I without my family? Who am I when the love I offered has been cast aside? The reflections in the mirror feel foreign. The person staring back at me is filled with sorrow, bewilderment, and an aching sense of loss. I may be a mother still, but my heart is fractured, and the warmth of familial love has turned to shadows. I remember the first time I felt the shift. It was subtle at first, like the gentle stirring of the wind before a storm. I was in the kitchen, making a batch of my famous chicken soup, the recipe handed down from my mother, who taught me that cooking is love made visible. The smell wafted through the house, a warm hug for anyone walking in from the cold. I had my apron on, the one with frayed edges that Anya loved to tease me about, and I was humming to myself, lost in thoughts of the family gathering I had planned for that weekend. Back then, the kitchen was the heart of our home, and I had every intention of keeping it that way. Anya walked in, her face all pinched and tense, like she had just bitten into a lemon. I could see the tension ripple through her body, despite the light of the afternoon sun streaming in through the windows. I hadn't realized I'd been so absorbed in my own world that I hadn't noticed how she'd changed. There was no smile, no teasing banter like before. When she snapped at me about using too much salt, I felt my heart drop a little. The Anya I knew was playful, appreciative of the little things that brought us joy. Instead, she was sharp, and I couldn't understand why that was. I dismissed it, convinced it was just a rough day, a fleeting moment of frustration. But day by day, the warmth in her demeanor began to evaporate like morning dew under the glaring sun. I could sense there was an undercurrent of resentment, but I couldn't fathom what I had done to deserve it. I had welcomed her into my home, treated her like my own flesh and blood. I had sacrificed my time, my advice, and my patience, molding her into the person I believed she could be. To see her recoil from me was like watching a flower wilt in real time. I tried to reach out, attempting to ask what was wrong during our quiet moments, but she would brush aside my concerns with vague answers and distant glances. It hurt, sharper than any knife. I started to notice the way she spoke about my son, about me, as if I were an inconvenience in her life, rather than a presence to be loved. It's a terrible thing, watching someone you poured your heart into grow callous and distant. The family dinners dwindled to nothing more than obligatory gatherings, and even those felt cold and stilted, as if the laughter we once shared had been replaced with an awkward silence. I tried to hold on to the memories of us cooking together, laughing as we battled over the last slice of pie, but those days felt further away than the stars. I couldn't shake the feeling that my nurturing had backfired, that I had unknowingly given her the tools to push me away. The breaking point came during a family gathering when she outright accused me of meddling in her life. I stood there, slack-jawed, my heart racing as she hurled accusations that I had wronged her, as if the very love I had shown was somehow a chain binding her, not the safety net I thought I had built. In that moment, I felt betrayed, like all those years of care had meant nothing. All the times I held her hand during hard moments, all the late-night talks, swept away in a tide of anger I couldn't understand. As she stormed out of the room, my son's confused expression mirrored my own heartache, and I was left clutching a spatula, feeling not just abandoned, but utterly bewildered by the betrayal of someone I had cherished like my own child. It has been days since I stood at that threshold, and yet the echo of the door slamming behind me still reverberates in my mind. I never imagined a time would come when the home I forged with love and care would turn into a battlefield marked by silence and resentment. The air was thick with unspoken words, and I could feel the distance growing between us like a yawning chasm I could neither bridge nor even fully comprehend. This was not the daughter-in-law I had taken in as my own, the one I had nurtured through her struggles, the one I celebrated with during milestones big and small. How had we gone from shared laughter in the kitchen to me being unwanted at my own family table? Even now I can picture her standing there, hands on her hips, her face twisted with anger as she labeled my presence an intrusion. I felt like a ghost haunting my own home, unable to reach out, to touch the fabric of a life I had woven so painstakingly. It was as if my very essence, my years of effort and sacrifices, had been disregarded in one swift motion. I remembered the countless nights I stayed up with her when her own mother was too preoccupied, the times I wiped her tears and cheered her on when she felt overwhelmed. Yet, she stood before me, her heart now armed with a harshness that pierced through the bond we had once shared. Visiting my son and my daughter-in-law had always been a joy, a laughter-filled gathering of family. But now, I can't help but notice how they avoid eye contact, how conversations slow to awkward halts as I enter the room. My heart aches in the absence of warmth that once enveloped me. I feel like a stranger in my own bloodline, an outsider looking in. It's almost as if they have painted a picture of me that no longer resembles the woman I am, a caricature of grievances that I am at a loss to understand. The walls echo back my loneliness, each silence a reminder of the rift that seems too great to heal. I often wonder what I did wrong. Was it simply a matter of my age, or the generational divide that now appears insurmountable? Or was it her insecurities that turned into a need to push me aside, as if my presence somehow masked her own strengths? I have replayed our last conversation over and over in my mind, searching for the clues that might provide clarity, but all I find is a swirling void, an absence that cannot be filled. She has built walls around her heart, and I am left standing outside, hands outstretched, longing to reach the daughter I once held dear. As I sit quietly in the corner of my cramped apartment, my eyes drift to the photos on the walls, moments frozen in time that serve as bitter reminders of happier days. A part of me clings to hope, thinking that one day, perhaps, the distance will shrink and the silence will dissolve. But each passing day feels like a heavy weight on my chest, and the dreams of reconnecting grow dimmer. Am I to remain a relic of the past, a once-loved matriarch now shunned? I look out the window at the world moving on, and all I want is to reach out and find my place in it once more. It was a chilly morning when I first felt the sting of betrayal seep into my bones, a feeling I thought was reserved for the young, for those who hadn't yet learned the lesson that love can sometimes wear a mask. I had just finished preparing breakfast, my son's favorite, pancakes with blueberries and a sprinkle of sugar, when my daughter-in-law, Clara, walked into the kitchen. Her usual buoyant spirit seemed absent that day, and as I looked up from the griddle, I felt a sense of foreboding settle in the pit of my stomach. I had raised Clara like my own, after all, taking her in when she was just a shy girl with dreams as bright as her sparkling blue eyes. Now, those same eyes seemed clouded with something I couldn't quite grasp. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The atmosphere shifted, casting a shadow over my heart that I couldn't shake off. I nodded, my hands now trembling slightly. I put aside the spatula and wiped my hands on a dish towel, unsure of what was about to unfold. As we sat at the small kitchen table, the scent of pancakes lingered in the air, a jarring contrast to the weight of the conversation that was brewing. I felt a sense of dread wash over me, a primal instinct alerting me that this was not a simple chat about household matters. Clara took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the table, and I could see her discomfort. "It's about Alex," she finally said, and the name alone pricked my heart. Alex, my son, the boy I had raised and cherished, was now a husband and father. I knew Clara had been struggling with the pressures of motherhood and her new life, yet something about her tone pierced my heart. "I can't do this anymore. I'm not happy," she continued, and every word felt like a dagger. The kitchen, once filled with warmth, felt colder with each moment that passed. I wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but I was frozen in place, caught between my instinct to protect her and my need to defend my family. As Clara spoke of her discontent, layers of my grief began to unravel. I realized my role had been turned upside down. The daughter-in-law I had treated like a daughter was now laying bare her grievances, all the while implying that I was part of the problem. The accusation hung heavy in the air. "You don't understand, do you?" she said, her voice rising with an edge of frustration. "You think everything is fine because you have your perfect little routine here, but I'm suffocating." The accusation landed hard as she pointed the finger at the life I had painstakingly built for us all. I felt the tears pricking at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. The bitterness of her words cut deeper than any knife. In that moment, as the betrayal seeped into my heart, I recognized something I never anticipated. I was losing her. All those years spent nurturing her, cheering her on, and trying to forge a bond that would last a lifetime felt as if they were dissolving before my very eyes. I wanted her to love my son as fiercely as I did, to cherish the moments we had created as a family. Instead, here she was, tearing the fabric of our shared life apart. I felt anger rise to the surface, but it was mixed with a profound sadness. I couldn't reconcile the girl I had nurtured with the woman who now sat across from me, casting shadows on my heart. As she left the kitchen, the sound of the door closing echoed in my chest, like a final goodbye. The first blow of a heart that had thought it was safe. I sat in the corner of my dimly lit living room, the air heavy with the scent of memories and unspoken words, when that letter slipped from the folds of the tattered book I had kept near me all those years. I didn't recognize the envelope at first. It was old, much like me, yellowing at the edges. But as I brushed the dust away, the familiar handwriting ignited a flicker of trepidation deep within my chest. It was from Margaret, my late husband's sister, whose presence had long since faded into the shadows of my past. I had not seen her in decades, but that moment felt like the kindling of a fire I thought I had long extinguished. Taking a deep breath, I prepared myself for whatever revelations this letter might hold. Margaret had always been a tumultuous presence in my life. Her jealousy over the bond I shared with my husband had manifested in countless ways, but I had expected her to be done with us by now. The words she penned were more than just an echo of a past resentment. As I read each line, I felt the walls I had built to protect myself begin to crumble. Secrets I had buried, even from myself, began to bubble up from the murky depths of my mind, threatening to swallow me whole. She spoke of family and blood, the ties that bind us, but also the weight of betrayal that can sever those ties irreparably. In her own way, she accused me of stealing not just her brother, but the affection of the very family I had nurtured with an open heart. I had raised my son David to be a good man, and I had taken in Rebecca, his wife, when she was in desperate need of love and support. I had given them all of myself. Yet here I was, a mere footnote in the narrative she spun, a villain in a tale I never intended to be part of. Rebecca's betrayal had stung enough, but Margaret's letter felt like salt on an open wound. I had stood by Rebecca through storms of her own making, the financial troubles, the familial disputes, even the secret she had kept hidden for so long that I had only just learned about. I thought we were past the point of secrets and shadows, and yet I found myself staring into a void that reflected years of trust turned sour. I had welcomed her into my heart and home, and now I wondered if that had been a foolish error, a misguided kindness that only set the stage for her betrayal. As I sat there, clutching the letter as if it were a lifeline, I began to grapple with a gnawing sense of regret. The quiet voice in my head whispered questions I had long buried. Had I done right by them? Had my love for Rebecca blinded me to her darker nature? In allowing her to slip into my heart, had I overlooked the flaws she hid beneath her charming exterior? I felt as if I was standing at a precipice, ready to leap into the unknown, torn between the family I had tried so hard to create and the realization that perhaps it had all been built on a shaky foundation. The ghosts of the past now loomed larger than ever, and with every word I read, I realized that the only way out of this labyrinth of betrayal was to confront the shadows I had tried so hard to leave behind. I can still remember the day she walked through my door, an eager young woman with dreams in her eyes and a heart full of hope. My son had just brought her home, a whirlwind of energy and promises, ready to take on the world. I welcomed her with open arms, treating her like a daughter from the moment we met. I was determined to give her everything I had missed when I was young, to show her what it meant to be part of a family, to envelop her in love and warmth. I had no idea back then that she would turn out to be the very person who would shatter my heart. Over the years, I poured my soul into nurturing our relationship. I taught her the recipes handed down from my grandmother, showed her how to sew, and even walked her through the intricacies of motherhood when my grandson was born. Every laugh we shared, every challenge we faced together, only deepened my affection for her. I thought we were building something beautiful, a bond stronger than mere blood ties. Little did I know, beneath her smile lay an undercurrent of resentment, simmering just below the surface, waiting for its moment to emerge. When my husband passed away, I thought we would unite in our grief, like the family we had become. Instead, it seemed to ignite a fire long hidden within her. I began to notice the way she spoke to me, the dismissive tone, the eyes that once twinkled with joy, now clouded with an impatience that left me confused. I tried to reach out, to understand what I had done to deserve her scorn, but every time I asked, the answer was met with silence, a wall growing taller between us. I felt like an intruder in my own life, a ghost haunting the very home I had lovingly built. The culmination of this painful evolution came abruptly when she decided it was time for me to leave. "You're too much of a burden," she said one afternoon, her voice steady, as though she were delivering a verdict rather than a dagger to my heart. I stood frozen, the words echoing in my mind, each syllable slicing through the emotions I had wrapped around her. How could she forget the countless days I had dedicated to her, the unconditional love I had shown? It felt as if I'd been erased from the narrative, like a character who had served their purpose and was no longer needed in her story. As I gathered my things from the home I had built with love, I felt the weight of betrayal settle on my shoulders. I had raised her, nurtured her dreams, and believed in the strength of our family bond. To be cast aside, to feel the coldness radiating from someone I had cherished so deeply, was a wound that never seemed to heal. In every corner of that house, in every shadow, I could feel the remnants of our shared laughter and intimacy, now tainted by her words. I left not just a home, but a part of my heart, a place that had once embodied family, now stripped bare and left behind to haunt me. The help I offered turned to rejection, and love twisted into bitterness, leaving me with haunting memories and an ache that would linger forever. I sat by the window, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the room. Days turned into weeks since I was unceremoniously tossed out of the house I had called home for over 50 years. At 80, I thought my days would be spent reminiscing about the laughter and love that had once filled those walls. Instead, they were filled with loneliness and betrayal. I never imagined that Ruth, whom I had nurtured as my own daughter, would become the architect of my despair. The last time I had seen her, I could hardly recognize the woman who had once held my hand as we picked out curtains for her wedding. Now, she had turned against me, and I felt the weight of that betrayal like a stone pressing down on my chest. It was on an ordinary Thursday that things began to change. I was sorting through old photo albums at the community center, losing myself in memories of crinkled smiles and family gatherings, when I heard a familiar voice. It belonged to my son David, who walked through the door, a hesitant smile on his face. As soon as he spotted me, his expression shifted from uncertainty to joy. All at once, I felt a surge of warmth and love. David had always been the backbone of our family, the one who understood the importance of connection, of family. We embraced a moment of pure, albeit bittersweet joy that reminded me of how precious our bond had always been. "Mom, I've missed you so much," he said, pulling back, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I couldn't help but smile despite the heaviness in my heart. "I'm sorry for how things have turned out. I wish I could have done something sooner." I wanted to tell him it wasn't his fault, that he was in a difficult position caught between Ruth and me, but the words lodged in my throat. Instead, I simply nodded, hoping he could understand the depth of the hurt that I carried. We spent the afternoon reminiscing about old times, sharing stories that made us laugh and cry. It felt as if a missing piece had been put back into my life, a flicker of warmth in an otherwise cold existence. Then, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, an unexpected knock on the community center door shattered our moment. I looked up, my heart racing. I didn't expect anyone else. David turned to answer it, and to my utter shock, there stood Ruth. She looked older, wearier than I remembered, but it was unmistakably her. I felt a rush of emotions, anger, betrayal, but also a flicker of hope that perhaps this was a chance for reconciliation. The air was thick with tension as she stepped inside, her eyes darting between David and me. The awkwardness hung palpably like a fragile thread that might snap at any moment. "Mom," she began, and I could hear the tremor in her voice. I braced myself for the worst, a justification for her actions, a plea for my understanding. But instead, she did something unexpected. She stepped closer, tears pooling in her eyes, and confessed her regrets over how she had treated me. "I didn't realize how much I needed you until you were gone," she said. David looked at us, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, a cautious hope igniting in his eyes. In that moment, I faced a choice: to carry the heavy burden of resentment or to open my heart to the possibility of healing. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but something deep within me stirred, urging me to take a step forward. I remember the day it happened, as if it were etched in my mind, a jagged scar that refused to heal. The early morning sun peeked through the curtains, casting a warm glow on the familiar corners of my kitchen, a kitchen where I had spent countless hours nurturing my family. It felt like any other day, but deep down I sensed the tension simmering beneath the surface, like a storm brewing just out of sight. My heart raced as I heard the heavy footsteps of my daughter-in-law Rachel approaching. It felt heavy with the weight of everything unspoken between us. The confrontation unfolded in slow motion, each word hitting me like a runaway train. She stood before me, her arms crossed tightly, eyes narrowed in a way I hadn't seen before. It was as if the little girl I once cradled in my arms had been replaced by a stranger, a woman ready to wield her words as weapons. The anger that had brewed quietly in the corners of our home spilled out, and I felt the heat of betrayal wash over me. "You don't belong here anymore," she had said, her voice cold and unyielding, sending shockwaves through my very being. Those words struck a deep chord within me, resonating with the pain of my heart. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Hadn't I sacrificed so much for this family? Didn't I raise her as one of my own, teaching her to cook, to love, to stand tall in the face of adversity? I searched her face for a glimmer of the warmth and affection I once knew, but all I found was a wall of resentment. "You took over my life," she accused, each syllable loaded with venom. It felt like a betrayal, not just of our relationship, but of the countless memories we had built together. Memories I had thought were fortified by love. The very essence of what it meant to be family was unraveling before my eyes, and I was powerless to stop it. I tried to speak, to explain myself, to remind her of the countless times I had been there for her. But my voice wavered, drowning in the flood of emotions swirling around us. "Rachel, I only wanted what was best for you," I managed to whisper, hoping to pierce through the armor she had wrapped around herself. Yet, each attempt only seemed to fuel her fire. She was adamant that I was intrusive, that I had overstepped boundaries that I never even knew existed. How had we fallen so far from the closeness we once shared? I felt the bitterness of the moment seep into my bones as tears threatened to spill down my cheeks. In that moment of confrontation, I realized I was not just fighting for a place in my son's home. I was fighting for my identity, for the love I had given without reservation. It was a struggle far deeper than the physical space I occupied. As Rachel hurled her accusations, a desperate resolve began to build within me. I had poured my heart and soul into this family, and I would not let her strip me of my dignity. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. "If this is how you feel, then maybe it's time for me to go," I said quietly but firmly, feeling a bittersweet relief in finally voicing what had become painfully clear. I didn't want to be a burden, but the thought of leaving behind the life I knew, the home I had built, was an unbearable weight. As I turned away from her that day, I felt as if I was walking away from a part of myself. The house, once a sanctuary filled with laughter and love, now felt like a prison. The finality of our confrontation echoed in my mind. I could hardly grasp that the young woman I had nurtured was now my judge and executioner, casting me out as if I were no longer worthy of the love I had painstakingly given. I knew I had to gather the pieces of my shattered heart and figure out what came next, but the ache of betrayal threatened to consume me. I had lost not just a home, but a family I thought would always stand by me. As I stood in the doorway, clutching the doorknob so tightly my knuckles turned white, I felt like a ghost haunting my own home. The echoes of laughter and warmth that once filled this house had been replaced by a chilling silence. It was that quiet that gnawed at my insides, a stark reminder of the betrayal I was grappling with. How did it come to this? I had poured my love, my energy, and my very essence into raising Lisa since the day my son brought her home, wide-eyed and filled with dreams. I had fought for her, nurtured her, and embraced her as my own. Yet here I stood, on the precipice of being cast aside, turned into an unwelcome visitor in the space I had built. When Lisa first married my son, I was not just a mother-in-law, I was her confidant, her cheerleader. I watched her grow into a remarkable woman, and I was proud to help shape her journey. My heart swelled with pride as I attended her graduation, her wedding, and eventually, I cradled my grandchildren in my arms. I believed I had forged bonds that were unbreakable, a tapestry woven with threads of laughter, shared meals, and late-night chats. But as I stood there, those memories felt like cruel mockery. How could she forget all the moments we'd shared? How could she dismiss the woman who had poured everything into nurturing her? It was a quiet afternoon when the first cracks appeared in our relationship, when I let slip a gentle suggestion about how to handle her son's minor behavioral issues. Instead of gratitude, I was met with resentment. "He's my son, not just yours to raise," she spat back, her words slicing through the delicate fabric of our relationship. I tried to brush it off, chalking it up to stress or exhaustion, but as weeks turned into months, those moments of tension turned into a torrent of accusations. Now, standing in the doorway, I felt the weight of her anger wash over me, a tidal wave of betrayal crashing against the foundation of our family. My heart raced as I replayed the events that led me to this moment. That fateful dinner was seared into my memory, the one where she stood, hands on her hips, and declared that I was no longer welcome to stay after my husband passed. The bitterness spilled from her lips like venom, and even as I tried to reason with her, to remind her of all the love I had given, she only dug in her heels. "You've had your time, Edith. You've done enough. Now it's our time to raise our family without your interference." Those words echoed in my mind, each syllable a dagger that cut deeper into my heart. How could someone I raised, someone I loved like my own, turn against me so swiftly? Now, as I looked around the house where I had lost so much, I realized that my heart was not just broken. It was shattered. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring the once cherished memories. I had nightmares of what would happen next. Would I be left out in the cold, abandoned by the very family I had devoted my life to? I felt the weight of the years and the love I had given her rise to the surface, a tidal wave of sorrow that threatened to drown me. They say love makes you vulnerable, and I had opened my heart all too willingly. The betrayal stung sharper than any physical wound, and in that moment, I learned that love could also be wielded as a weapon that, sometimes, cuts deeper than any knife. I remember the day vividly. It was like any other Sunday, but the afternoon light cast a strange glow that felt heavy on my shoulders. The scent of the roast chicken I had prepared wafted through the house, mingling with the laughter of my grandchildren playing in the yard. I had always imagined that my home would be a sanctuary for them, a place filled with love, warmth, and togetherness. Yet as I watched my daughter-in-law, Sarah, handle her children with a firm but anxious grip, I sensed the shifting tides of our family dynamic. It was subtle at first, but the cracks were starting to form, and I feared they would lead to a chasm I couldn't cross. Sarah had always been a part of our family, but the moment she entered my son's life, I felt an unsettling tension brewing. I had welcomed her with open arms, intending to bridge any gap that existed between us. I poured love into her, sharing my recipes, teaching her family traditions, and embracing her as my own. I thought my investment in her happiness would yield a lifelong bond, but little did I know it would become the seed of my eventual betrayal. As the years went by, her demeanor subtly shifted from gratefulness to a sense of entitlement. She began to see me less as a mentor and more as a rival, and it gnawed at my heart like a constant ache. When the day came that Sarah asked me to leave, it was as if the sun had been swallowed by darkness. I stood there in disbelief, memories of family dinners and birthday celebrations flashing through my mind like images from a cherished album. "You're not my mother," she said, her voice cold and hard, as though misunderstanding echoed through the walls of our home. Those words cut deeper than any knife. I had poured my heart and soul into raising my son, and for a time, she had been a daughter to me. Now, I felt like an intruder in a house that had once radiated love. The betrayal was overwhelming. I had committed myself to her and her children, and in return, I received the cruelest rejection. As news of my expulsion spread through our extended family and friends, the reactions were mixed. Some rallied to my side, incredulous that Sarah could turn against me. They expressed their outrage and disbelief, while others, perhaps out of jealousy or guilt, whispered about my supposed shortcomings as a mother-in-law. I felt as though I was standing on a precipice, the world around me crumbling. I had given everything to this family, investing my years in nurturing bonds, and now, facing isolation. It was alarming to see how quickly alliances shifted when criticism surfaced. The very people I thought would defend me seemed apprehensive, as if my betrayal would somehow taint their own relationships with Sarah. In those dark days following my departure, I felt the weight of judgment bearing down on me. Neighbors who had once greeted me with kindness now looked away, as if they could see the rips in my heart. I sat alone, wrestling with the thoughts that invaded my mind like unwelcome guests. What had I done wrong? Was my love suffocating? Did I invest too much into what I thought was family? I still believed in the bond we had formed, and it shattered me to see my devotion cast aside. I questioned if love alone could ever be enough in a world that so easily categorized people and their worth. Where did that leave me? I was left to grapple with the profound emptiness in my heart, wondering if I would ever be able to build bridges to a family that had, just like that, turned into strangers. I sit by the window, watching the leaves swirl in the autumn breeze, and I can't help but think about how the seasons change, how each one follows the last with a certainty that doesn't seem to apply to life. 50 years of love and sacrifice, yet here I am, a cast-off from my own family. Just yesterday, I overheard the girls at the community center chattering about their children, sharing stories and laughter that should feel like home to me, but instead, they feel like a world away. I feel as if I'm peering through a glass, a silent observer to lives that once included me. As the chill of the evening wraps around me, I rummage through old photographs, trying to find a glimmer of a memory that makes sense of the current chaos. There's young Daniel, eager and bright-eyed, his cheeks dimpled with laughter as he tumbles down the backyard slide. I let out a soft sigh, recalling when Emma first walked through our door, a bundle of energy and persistence. I took her in, hoping to make her feel at home, to welcome her into our family. I remember the countless times I guided her through the nuances of our family traditions, the recipes I shared, the late-night talks filled with dreams and fears. How could that connection dissolve into such blatant betrayal? I've spent sleepless nights questioning my own judgment. Did I fail to teach her the values of family, love, and loyalty? Or was it simply naive of me to believe that love could conquer all? I can picture the moment so clearly. I had just returned from a doctor's appointment, my body creaking and protesting, yet my spirit still convinced I could be of use. The words she flung at me that day echoed like shards of glass, cutting deep. She stood there, arms crossed, a hard set to her jaw, as if I were a stranger intruding upon her territory. I had devoted my life to nurturing that very territory, and in an instant, it felt as if she had ripped out the roots of our relationship and left me to wither alone. This morning, I also tried calling Daniel, hoping for a glimpse of solace from my son. But the call went straight to voicemail. Another reminder that the connection I thought we had was frayed at the edges. I miss the days when we would share our lives over Sunday roasts, with laughter spilling into the corners of our home like sunlight. I wonder if he even cares to know what I'm feeling now, or if he's simply too wrapped up in his own life to notice the void I've been forced into. The emptiness of our interactions weighs heavily on my heart, as if each unanswered call is another nail in the coffin of our relationship. As I sift through the memories, I begin to see the thread of resilience within me, a flicker of determination that I thought had been snuffed out. This betrayal, this loss, has unearthed a part of me I had long buried under the weight of familial duty. I may have been tossed aside, but I am not broken. Perhaps this moment is not merely a betrayal, but a chance for rediscovery. I may not be the grand matriarch I once was, but I can still reclaim my narrative. I won't allow Emma's harsh rejection to define the entirety of my existence. As I close the album, I feel a new strength emerging from the ashes of my sorrow. The realization that the love I poured into my family was never in vain. It shaped who I am, flawed, resilient, and ready to embrace what lies ahead. I stood at the window, watching the leaves fall from the old oak tree in our front yard, the branches becoming more bare with each passing day. It had once been a grand tree, its leaves of vibrant green in spring and gold in autumn. Now it mirrored my own state of being, stripped down, exposed, and fragile. I thought of the years I'd spent nurturing not just that tree, but the very family that now felt foreign to me. My daughter-in-law, Lila, had become a force in our house, a whirlwind that swept through, tossing aside the love I had poured into our family like fallen leaves I'd long since stopped raking. Lila had been like a daughter to me. I had welcomed her into my home, shared my secrets, and guided her through life's milestones. I thought my support would create a bond that could weather any storm. But as time passed, I watched a shift, a subtle change that gradually blossomed into a rift. It began with small things, a dismissive comment here, an eye roll there. Eventually, it turned into sharp words that cut deeper than I ever thought possible. I used to tell myself that she was just going through a phase, that she needed to assert herself, but the truth was, I had become an outsider in my own home. Then came the day she stood in front of me, her arms crossed and her voice laced with accusations. "You're not my mother," she declared, as if it were a truth that had unraveled the very fabric of our relationship. In that instant, I felt the years of love and sacrifice slip away, leaving an ugly emptiness behind. I had sacrificed so much for my son's happiness, and in turn, I had hoped to find a kind of joy in her presence. But joy had morphed into betrayal, a feeling that festered and grew between us like a stubborn weed choking the flowers in my garden. Despite everything, I couldn't help but reflect on our shared moments. There were laughter-filled Sundays, meals cooked together, and late-night talks about dreams and fears. It puzzled me how someone who had shared so much of her life with me could turn so cold. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but instead, I found myself retreating into silence, my heart heavy with disappointment. I realized that the version of Lila I had held on to was perhaps just an ideal I had created, a phantom of what I hoped we could become. And as painful as it was, I began to accept that maybe, just maybe, reconciliation wasn't the path we were destined to walk. I decided that even if she didn't want to repair what had unraveled, I could find peace in letting go of the hurt. Perhaps it was time to focus on myself and the love I still had for my son and my grandchildren. I learned that sometimes loving someone meant allowing them to choose their own path, even when it hurt like hell to watch them stray away. There was a bittersweet freedom in accepting the reality of our situation and finding a way to embrace the remaining threads of my life, however frayed they might be. The world outside continued to change, and I too would find my own way through this new chapter, armed with memories that, while bittersweet, were still a testament to the love we once shared. The sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the living room, where I had spent countless hours knitting by the fireplace. It was one of those evenings that pulled you into nostalgia, making you reflect on the years filled with laughter and joy. Easy laughter once echoed off these walls. And now, silence wrapped around me like an old, tattered quilt. As I sat there, my fingers tingling with the memory of soft yarn slipping through them, I couldn't help but think about how I had raised Emily as if she were my own child. I had truly believed that the bond we shared was unbreakable. How wrong I was. After 50 years of devotion and love, the betrayal felt more like a dagger. Emily had taken my trust, twisted it, and turned it into a weapon against me. She had grown into a woman I no longer recognized, a woman who booted me out of my own home like a stranger on the street. I remember her once running to me with open arms, calling me Mom, her smile a bright spark in my life. Now, that same smile felt like it was carved from wood, devoid of warmth. She had changed, and with her change had come a deep-seated resentment that I couldn't understand. It was in that quiet moment, surrounded by the remnants of my life, that I decided to make one final gesture, a symbolic release of everything I had held on to so tightly. My heart was heavy as I walked to the small table by the door, where the old family photos were stacked. I could see the years flash by in those pictures. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, the summer vacations we had spent laughing together. Each memory was a brick in the wall of my heart, and I knew now that those bricks would have to come down. Emily had already built a wall between us, and I had no choice but to dismantle my own. With trembling hands, I picked up the photograph of our last family Christmas, where we were all blissfully unaware of what was to come. There I stood, arms around my beloved son and Emily, both beaming. I felt a tear slide down my cheek as I whispered a farewell to the happiness encapsulated in that frame. I took the photo, carefully removed it from the frame, and let it fall into the fire. The flames licked at the edges, consuming the remnants of a life I had once cherished. With each crackle, I felt a sense of both relief and sorrow washing over me. I was letting go, not just of the photo, but of the hope that what had been could be again. As the fire devoured the last of the photograph, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Perhaps it was time for me to find my own peace, to redefine what family meant in my life. I had held on for too long, not realizing that love could also be a shackle. Emily was free now to live her life without me, and I would have to steal back my own sense of self. The symbolic nature of that final act felt like a cleansing, a ritual to reclaim my spirit. Though my heart ached, I also felt an ember of resilience sparking within me, a stubborn refusal to allow betrayal to be my only legacy. That evening, as I sat by the fire, watching the last remnants of my past disintegrate into ash, I understood that it was time to start anew. The shadows grew longer and the light dimmer, but I was grateful for the warmth of the flames. They had given me a chance to escape the chains that Emily had unknowingly tightened around me. I would rise again, as I always had, but this time, I would be free to forge my own path, unburdened by the love that had turned into betrayal. And perhaps, just perhaps, there would be a new chapter waiting for me in the quiet corners of my life. As I sit by the window, the sun dipping low and casting long shadows across my modest living room. I find myself reflecting on the twists and turns of life that have brought me to this moment. This house holds echoes of laughter, love, and a myriad of memories, but now it feels strangely empty, haunted by the silence left in the wake of a betrayal I never anticipated. The daughter-in-law I welcomed into my family, who I treated like my own, has ushered me out like an unwanted visitor. I should feel rage, but instead, I find an unsettling peace wrapped around my heart. It's ironic, isn't it? I always believed that nurturing someone meant they would bloom into the person you hoped they might become. I devoted countless hours to sharing my wisdom, my recipes, and my stories, thinking that I was passing down a legacy of love. For years, I stood beside her as she navigated the challenges of life, balancing work, motherhood, and the chaos that comes with being part of a family. I didn't raise her to turn against me, yet here I am, grappling with the realization that my affection transformed into a weapon wielded against me. When did my love become a burden rather than a gift? I can't help but taste the bitterness of that betrayal, like cold metal on my tongue. There was an understanding between us, built on trust and mutual respect, or so I believed. Now, those moments we shared, the late-night conversations, the laughter over family dinners, feel like a trap I inadvertently set for myself. I can still hear her voice, charming and confident, as she promised to honor the family values I instilled. The memories now play like a cruel film reel, every scene distorted by the sharpness of my realization. I raised not just a daughter-in-law, but a member of my heart, and I feel like I was robbed of a relationship that was meant to be one of the deepest connections. Yet, as the sunsets grow bolder each evening, I find strength in acceptance. I may have been cast aside, but my spirit remains unbroken. It's easy to dwell in sorrow, to get lost in the moments when I should have felt safety and love. But I am more than the pain of betrayal. I am a woman who has weathered storms, who has survived life's upheavals, and who still possesses the capacity to love and forgive, perhaps not for her, but for myself. I won't allow her actions to diminish the value of my years or my capacity to nurture. I reflect back on my own mother's teachings, how she elegantly navigated difficult relationships, always choosing to rise above, and I feel a flicker of that same resilience within me. So here I am, stronger than I have ever been. With every sunset that paints the sky, I remind myself that there's beauty in closing chapters, even those I thought would last forever. I refuse to let bitterness carve lines into my spirit. I will walk away with my head held high, carrying the lessons I've learned. I will remember to fill my days with joy, to forge new connections, and to embrace the freedom that comes from letting go. Life, in all its unpredictability, is still a journey worth traversing. My heart may ache, but it is not hollow. It is brimming with the love I still possess, ready to share it with those who value it, those who understand the true essence of what it means to be family. As I sit here, the sunlight waning through the window, I reflect on the tangled threads of my life, woven with love, sacrifice, and sometimes heartache. 50 years of laughter, struggles, and memories shared with a family I once thought would cradle me in my twilight days. Yet, life has its own rhythm, a melody that often plays in unexpected keys. I raised her as my own, nurtured her dreams, and stood by her side through storms and sunshine alike. In the end, I found myself on the outside, looking in, a page torn from the book of my own making. But in this quiet moment, I have learned to embrace the beauty of acceptance. Forgiveness is a gentle balm, one I tend to my own heart. Though the sting of betrayal lingers, I find solace in the myriad of memories that flow through me like a river of gold, shimmering with the light of days gone by. I have no regrets. My love was freely given, and that love, whether acknowledged or not, will continue to ripple through time. There is a profound peace in letting go, in releasing the grip on what could have been. Life is too precious to dwell upon hurts that no longer serve. I choose to honor the joy I once felt, the laughter that once filled these walls, and the lessons learned from the shadows cast by love. If you listened until the end, thank you. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. Maybe the next story we tell here will be yours.